on time to properly start. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Tracy's just totally stolen my lines there. My name's Jo. I am one of the directors with Ten2Two. We are part-time recruitment specialists, have been around for about 17 years now, and are going strong. We're really pleased to say. We are really, really pleased that you've joined us this evening. We run these webinars completely free of charge, and we don't ask for you to have your cameras on or anything uncomfortable. This is purely a chance for you to absorb some information. So please do take it in the best way for you. If you wish to write notes, you can, but as Tracy was saying a moment ago, there will be a recording shared with people. There will be some useful information shared, and we will have time at the end for a Q&A, which will also be followed up in a Q&A document, hopefully tomorrow, or at least over the next couple of days. If you enjoy what you experience, then please do give us a review afterwards, either on our Facebook page, through Google, or you can just email in your thoughts. Share it with your friends, get them to sign up. We always love having new candidates on board and being able to share our wisdom and knowledge on topics with them as well. Tonight's topic, hopefully you all know, and that's why you're here, is writing your CV. It's a daunting prospect. We completely understand that it's nobody's favourite part of job searching. So tonight we are giving you some practical hints, tips and guidance on what to do, what not to do. And hopefully you'll come away from this evening feeling much more confident to be able to go away and start work on that document. In a minute, I'm going to stop talking and hand over to my lovely colleague Tracy, who's going to be taking you through the bumper part of today's webinar. We are going to get through quite a lot of information. It is quite pacey. There is a lot. If you've got a question partway through, please do use the Q&A box. I will be monitoring those questions, so please, they will be seen. I might not interject. I might save it until the Q&A at the end, but do not worry, we are paying attention. If we don't have time to get to everybody's questions in the Q&A live today, then as I said, we will follow up with a general Q&A document. And if you have something really specific that you want to talk about, or you just need some additional help after tonight, then we are always, always, always happy to help. So please do get in touch, and we'll do everything that we can.
Great.
Tracy, would you like to introduce yourself before you start?
I will introduce myself. So I'm Tracy Adams. I'm another director at Ten2Two. I've been with the business since 2018. And I think, as with Jo and everybody else in Ten2Two, we absolutely love what we do at Ten2Two and trying to make a difference for part-time, typically parents, but part-time professionals working part-time. So we love this. So let's get going. Without further ado, I'm going to share the slides because we've got probably, I'm going to try and get it down into sort of 25 minutes. So that we've got lots of time for Q&As, because I know there'll be loads of Q&As. So here we go. I'm just sharing it into a full slide. Let me just go back to the beginning. There we go. Oh, there we are.
Giving people a sneak peek.
Yeah, I know. So does that look all right? Can you see that, Jo? Does that look all right to you?
I can see that. Yeah. Again, if anyone's got any problems, then please pop it in the Q&A and we'll try and address any technical issues.
Lovely. So whistle stop tour, as Jo said, I'm not going to cover anything else that she's said about what we're going to follow up with. Don't worry about writing it down. We will send stuff out. Going to take about 25 minutes. So let's have a look at the agenda and what are we going to cover. So why a CV? Just going to run through this quickly so we can get into the detail. Where to start? Where do you start? Some of the basics, which might seem like we're teaching you to suck eggs, but actually things have moved on in CV world. You know, when I used to write a CV back in the day, there's a lot of stuff you don't need now. So some of the basics. The main components, that's in yellow and highlighted in gold, whatever, because it really is probably your chunkiest part and the part that maybe is putting you off from actually getting going and writing, because it feels like there's a lot of info there. but we've got a lovely format and we'll send this out tomorrow and it'll just help you get going and some structure. What to avoid, so the pitfalls, and then a quick wrap up. So let's get going with the first one. So why do we need a CV? Now, obviously you want to secure an interview, and there are so many people, candidates going for jobs, that you want to have your CV to go onto you want to be put onto the yes pile. You want a hiring manager, recruiter to look at your CV and go, yes. If that hiring manager and recruiter looks at your CV and goes, I'm just, there's too many question marks about I don't understand that. It's not clear. We want to avoid those. There's so much you can do to eradicate any of those question marks. It is still the primary currency. Now, I've heard people talk about video applications, using LinkedIn as the CV. CVs, I would say, I think Joe will agree with me, are, I'd say 100% what clients ask me for. I don't think I had a recent client that's asked for a LinkedIn profile or a video entry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think all of our clients still are keen to see a CV in a standalone document as well, rather than, as you said, sort of immersed into a LinkedIn profile or anything like that.
Absolutely. It is your sales tool, so it needs to be a well-presented sales tool, selling document about you. It is also a script. So bear in mind, whatever you're writing on this CV, you need to be able to have a conversation about when it gets to interview. It's a conversation starter. It's not just a conversation starter, it's the conversation when you go to interview. It's not stagnant. I think we'll go through this, we'll keep talking about this quite a lot. You must tailor your CV for the roles you're going for. You've got to make it relevant and highlight. You can chop and change it so it highlights relevant experience each time you apply for a role. So where do we start? Let's have a look. Let's move on to the first one. Right, this is all about, oh, sorry. Do you know what? I've just realised I haven't had my bullet points on. There we go. I was reading from my notes and not the screen. How embarrassing. So where do we start? Right. So you need CV isn't a document that you can try and fit in around other jobs within the house. You need to be able to focus on this and give it some proper time. So get yourself into the right mindset. Give yourself space and a bit of peace and quiet to start to focus on it. And I think you'll find once you've started to put a structure in place, it becomes easier to populate it. Consider your audience. Now, there are many different people who might read your CV. So there's the hiring manager who may know everything about the job, everything inside out, all the jargon, all the sort of terminology. But there may be a HR manager or a recruiter who knows a lot about the job, but not all the detail. You may have a junior in the team who's been given the task of looking at your CV and just looking for core words. It could even be an AI or a bot looking at your CV and assessing CVs for words. So you need to bear that in mind when you're writing your CV and consider what you can put into the CV. And you're not necessarily going to always know that information. Unfortunately, you aren't necessarily going to know that it's definitely going to be the hiring manager, and therefore you can be as technical or as detailed as you'd like. So you have to judge it and judge what you're writing in your CV. Be clear on the goal. So are you looking for a part-time role, for example, in your existing field, or are you looking for something in a different sector? You're looking for fully remote. This sort of positioning, you probably need to be clear on your CV about what you're looking for, and create the basic outline, and that'll kick you off and get you going, that you can start to populate. And we've got a template that'll help you for that. So some basics. Again, I hope I'm not teaching you to suck eggs here, because things are slightly different, but it just makes sure that you're fine-tuning these bits. So contact details. Nowadays, we tend to just put on your mobile number, your email address, and probably just your town. Now, as a recruiter, when you register with us, we do need your address so we can tailor information and send you information. But when it's being put forward to a job, if you're doing it directly with the employer, They probably need to know roughly where you're based, but you don't need to release all of your information. You don't need to give them the entire address and postcode, just an idea. If you've got a LinkedIn profile, include it. It's nice to have, as long as it backs up what's on your CV, it mirrors what's on your CV. If you're in a job that doesn't necessarily need LinkedIn, you sort of are behind the scenes, you don't need to network, you don't need to be out there with your LinkedIn profile, don't worry about it. But if you have got one, it can be helpful, particularly for things like sales jobs, business development. It's just a nice add-on.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, just to say the other thing about a LinkedIn profile for people who are quite active on LinkedIn is it's a lovely place to put additional testimonials or references. So it can really bolster the content of your CV without being on your CV. Again, if you're not a LinkedIn user, then don't worry about it. But if you are a LinkedIn user, then it is worth using that as a tool to reach out to your network to get that really useful bits of additional information.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a separate webinar we've done on LinkedIn, which you can look at as well. So, we can point you to some of this information. That's a bigger topic in its own right. Format of CVs. It is really basic stuff, but it's something that over time you might keep adapting your CV, and that formatting might just go a little bit awry and get lost a little bit. So make sure it's consistent, that you're using the same font, the same typeface, consistency in sort of layout, use bullet points, make it clear. We'll talk more about sort of Word PDF designed CVs further down the presentation. So I'll come on to that as well. Length. There is the age-old thing about having 2 pages for a CV. It still stands if you can. I mean, don't beat yourself up if it, slips into 3 pages. But bear in mind, typically, I think a hiring manager might spend 8 seconds glancing at a CV. So they will look at your first page and may make a quick decision in sort of 8 to 10 seconds. So that first page is really important. But if they pick up a document and it's 6 pages, imagine how they're going to feel. They've got to get through 6 pages. So length is really important. You don't need to squish it into one, but as long as that first page has core information, which we'll go through in that section around, a lot of the content. So we'll cover that off. Relevance. So just be relevant with what you're including. You don't need to include, if you've got a 30-year career, that you don't need to include everything from your 30 years. It's going to be relevant for this particular role. So there might be training or education mentioned here, or previous roles that you did when you were 20, 18, 19, 20, that don't need to be mentioned. You can reference that you did certain jobs in a period, but you don't need to go into detail about a lot of stuff. So just bear in mind, that's one way of keeping it shorter. Photo, I think we're definitely of the opinion, no photos. I know it's you think it might be a nice thing to add on, but we don't know. We don't know the people who are reading your CV, and with the best will in the world, I'd love to be really positive about everybody who reads your CV in the world, and you're going to be going directly to employers, not always using us. We don't know what that bias, that photo might encourage. So just take it off. Don't include it. So keep it as easy to read as possible. Final point there. And again, we'll come on to an example to show you. So the main components, I think this is the piece that is the chunkiest bit to get going with. And we're going to cover profile, key skills, career history, education, and other information. So the first thing you need, pen profile or a pen portrait, whatever you want to call it. It's a short paragraph, 4 or 5 lines, and it says who you are and what field you're in. The idea is that you're hooking the reader in really quickly. You must mirror the job advert in these first few sentences, and I'll give you an example in a minute. It is an opportunity to sell your skills and experience. Don't be shy. So, for example, if you've got 15 years in sales and you've never missed a target, say that in that very first paragraph. If you're going for a sales job, of course, you know. So for example, say the job description talks about needing a marketeer who's a qualified marketeer in B2B tech, for example. So you literally, and mirror literally the job advert. I would say, if that was me, I would say I'm a CIM qualified marketeer with 15 years experience of marketing in B2B tech. So, you know, quite straightforward. And I might add in, so I'd look at the job description and they may say we need digital skills, you know, or somebody who's comfortable with the digital side of marketing. And I might then add on, and for the past 5 years, I've focused more on the digital channels. So something like that. And I mean, that was literally off the top of my head, but there's a way of encapsulating it in sort of 4 or 5 lines and always be led by the job description. So what are your key skills section? So you've got your profile. Your next sort of section should be your key skills. These are a number of bullet points, probably 7 or 8. I think 8's quite a nice number because you could actually have them as 2 columns, 4 bullets and 4 bullets. This is a brilliant opportunity to pop in simple words, simple phrases, maybe systems or software you've used, link it back to the job description. And this is something that you can play around with very quickly and very easily on the CV. And you can change the order, take some out, put others in, look at the job description and look what they're asking for. Obviously only put in what you have got, you know. We'll come on to this as well. Don't sort of make it up because you're going to have to talk about it in an interview. But there's some example ones here. You know, you're good at project management, administration, contract management. You can mention software there that you've used. So this is quite a nice feature of a CV on the very first page that links you to that job. Career history. So this is the biggest part, and I think a lot of people bolt on their roles every time they do another job, and you sort of lose sight of what you did before. Sometimes it might just be a case of having a fresh look at it. Always start with your most recent experience and go backwards chronologically. Always include gaps and reference your gaps. So even if you've had a career break, do mention that. There should always be a career story, a career journey. So there's no question marks. Your career gaps, we have done a separate session on this. And again, we can link you to this because there's some helpful content that you can use when trying to describe a career break. But for example, you might have career break due to relocation and settling the family. You know, career break due to maternity leave. You could even have career break due to, you know, a recent operation, fully recovered. So be honest about it. And it's got to be consistent. So your chronological details have got to be consistent. We tend to say, don't do in detail any more than 15 years. So if it goes beyond that, you can summarize that earlier period into a single line, you know, simply the date, the company name, and the job title. And if you've got quite a few of those and it's just looking like a long list, if it's really quite a long time ago, just summarize it in a paragraph or a sentence. That's perfectly acceptable, as long as you sort of focus on the past 15 years, really. Focus on your achievements. And avoid industry speak and acronyms. As we mentioned earlier, you don't really know who's going to read this. So if your CV is full of acronyms, which might mean a lot to the hiring manager, it won't necessarily mean a lot to a recruiter or a junior. Use data. So try and give evidence in your roles that substantiates what you've done. And, you know, this is the difference between a sort of a CV where you're talking about your responsibilities and a CV where you're talking about things you've achieved or things you've done. And we talk the next point using action verbs. So that could be, I led a team of 7. I managed a budget of X, Y, and Z. I communicated with stakeholders from, you know, X, Y, and Z. I authored 4 white papers. You know, sort of action verbs and quantifiable, if you can, numbers, not necessarily numbers, but quantifiable to give it some depth. So here's an example, trying to pull that together. So marketing manager, company X, dates, then a simple sentence. If you can, put a sentence in about the company. Don't do a whole paragraph, just a sentence. And that sometimes helps when you're going for a role, because they can understand, the employer can understand what sector you're in and if it's relevant to them. Reason for leaving. So I didn't talk about in the previous slide, but this is really helpful and important if you've had quite a few job moves because of your contracting, it's interim roles, you've had lots of redundancies, and don't worry about redundancies. You know, the old perception of someone being redundant compared to the job is redundant. You know, it is now, it's no longer seen, it maybe was seen as a negative, it isn't anymore. And I think the pandemic particularly has thrown everybody's CVs into chaos. From the pandemic, for the past 4 years, we see CVs where there are so many job moves because you were made redundant because of the pandemic, and since then haven't been able to get back into that, the kind of role you want. And I think employers get that. But just say that, say it, you know, explain if it's redundancy or explain if you've relocated, for example. And here you can see 4 bullet points. You can do more than 4. Don't worry about the number. I think in terms of the number of bullet points, for the more recent roles or the more relevant roles, do include more information. You might do 8, 9, 10. Don't stress too much about making it really, really short because you want to include information. I think where you make it short is if it's not a role that's as relevant, or it's a role that's really old and not as relevant. So this one, they've used action verbs, great, you know, designed and implemented a new social media campaign and trying to put in here numbers. So by X%, redesigned, reviewed, you know, managed. So a nice blend of stuff that they achieved and did, really, weren't just responsible for. So that's the chunkiest bit, I'd say. After that, this is the bit that gets sort of, it gets stuck at the bottom, it gets chucked to the bottom. It's not that it's unimportant, and for some sectors this might be more important than others. So education, always start with your highest level of education. And if, for example, in some sectors, for example, accountancy, you are an ACCA, ACA qualified accountant, that kind of information is really important right at the front. Because for many roles in accountancy, you have to have that kind of qualification, AAT, ACA, ACCA. And you can even put those next to your name, particularly things like ACCA and ACA on the very top of your CV. So it just depends on the type of sector, the type of role you're going for, what, you know, how much of the education you put on and where you put it on the CV. But typically it's better sitting towards the back. Start with the highest level. If you didn't go onto A levels, you know, back in the day, or you didn't do a degree, don't worry about it. I don't think you necessarily need to put that you every single grade for every single GCSE or O level. Occasionally get asked by a client to only submit people who have maths and English at grade C and above. You know, that's sort of really dating employers, to be honest. That's O levels. So I think that's really rare. And if you've got 20, 25 years under your belt, it's almost irrelevant at that point. But put the highest level of education, maybe put your A levels if you've got those, but it doesn't need to be a big chunk. Include relevant training, and this is really important, just the relevant training, because I think in your career you've probably been through a huge number of training sessions. I mean, you might have specific training related. If you're a project manager, you know, you might have your Prince 2 and things like that, which is really important. But if there's other stuff that there was an internal training session sort of 20 years ago, it doesn't need to be mentioned. It's just one of those areas that you can cut down a little bit. Mention that, including letters after your name in contact details. and additional information. So if you want to put stuff about your interests and hobbies, please do. It can be nice, you know, if you've got space, it can give a bit about you out there. I had a client once who was a hot air balloon enthusiast, bizarrely, and I got a CV from a candidate who was a hot air balloon enthusiast as well. Couldn't believe my luck. He had it on his CV. He got an interview, not because of the hot air ballooning. He did have all the right skills. He didn't get the job, but they had a lovely interview and it broke the ice, and it was common ground that got them, you know, got them talking at the interview, and it made for a really good interview. He just didn't have the right skills technically. But he got through to interview. They had a great conversation. And I think interests are nice. It can be a bit about you. If you don't have room, don't worry about it. You know, it's not the end of the world. And I think your character and tone can come across in your CV as well when you're writing. One other thing that we are often asked about is whether you should include references or not at this point. Don't put any references on. They should really only be requested when you are offered a job and you accept, and the offer is usually subject to references. And I think almost all employers accept that you will go and get them once you've been offered the job. There may be some exceptions where you have to provide references up front. Sometimes education asks that, but there is usually a respect that you don't have to contact your current employer. You know, I think everybody respects that. So references, yeah, leave the details off. You don't need to take up space with those. And if you do have a LinkedIn profile, you know, that is one way of, I suppose, giving an endorsement of yourself. If you have recommendations on there from other people, that's a nice way. I think, Joe, you mentioned it earlier. That's a nice way for an employer to have a quick look at you without having to dig around for references up front. So that's the career side. Check and double check, and you should be checking and double checking again and again and again. And I'd say with your CV, even when you think you've finished, put it aside for a night, a day, and go back to it and read it again. But there's still more to talk about. We haven't even finished. So pitfalls. Never lie, you know, it will just catch you out, and you need to be confident talking about this stuff in an interview. So make sure, here you go, there are achievements you're confident about. So make sure that what you've written, it's a conversation. That is going to be the conversation in interview. Remember, the interviewer is going to use that to talk through what you've done. Beware of CV building packages. Now, I'm not averse to these if it helps you and you're really struggling and it helps you craft a CV. The only thing I am wary about is they can be designed in such a way that their format is fixed or clunky or isn't read very well by systems. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, if you are tailoring your CV, which should be for every single job, they can be made, it can be awkward to make them, to tailor them for each job. So make sure if you are doing anything like that, that the format is simple and you can tailor and tweak it yourself without any sort of extra cost and going back for
just one other point which has happened unfortunately to a candidate recently. Please make sure there are no watermarks from the company providing you with the template left on your template when you start sending it in, because that can really catch people out. Yeah. It's something that can be easily missed, or maybe a little reference to the company who have designed template in the footer. So yeah, we are really tight on time, Tracy, so we're going to need to power through this last bit.
Right, fancy fonts. So we talked about this. Make sure your fonts and your formatting are all consistent. And let me just go back to that quickly. If you are a creative and you want to have a creative CV, try not to do what we've just said about sort of a really creative CV, because it can get thrown out by systems. It would be better to put a link to your portfolio. Avoid long acronyms. Just remember who might be reading and not understanding. Explain the gaps, which we've talked about. And then anything else that raises a question, read it again, you know, get someone else to read it. And then finally, this I think just summarizes what we want you to do. Make it easy to read, concise, be relevant, pull in all the core words that you can. Try not to leave any question marks, no gaps, must be clear journey, career journey. And we want to get you onto the yes pile, whether that's for an interview or an assessment, you just want to get onto the yes pile. So there we go. Sorry, that flew by.
Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. There was
questions.
lots of information there. The Q&A box has been going pretty bonkers while you've been talking. So thank you, everybody, for interacting so much. I'm really sorry if I haven't been able to answer your question. I have been trying to come back to most people as we go. Some of them are quite personal in nature. So those ones I'm not going to share live. But there are a couple of themes that have definitely come up that I'm going to kick off the Q&A with, if that's okay. People out there, if you've got further questions, please do type away and get them into the question box, and we will try and get to them in the next 8 minutes. So lots of people asking questions about colour on CV. So I know we've just talked about this in terms of fancy PDFs, or people from creative industries and so on. But apparently there are people out there being advised to use light blue for personal details, so that their professional information stands out more when it's in black and white. It's not something I've heard before, to be completely honest, but what are your thoughts, Tracy, on colour?
Well, no, I mean, if someone wants to make that a nice bit of formatting, absolutely go for it. I've never heard it. I don't think it really matters. I'm not sure that it's read any differently by systems. But if it just looks nice and it looks professional, fine. I've never heard it before, but yeah.
Excellent, thank you. We've got other questions. Lots of people asking for links. That's fine. We can make sure we're sending out links.
Yeah.
Should I include that I run my own business?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People who have run their own business tend to have exceptionally broad skills base. Yeah. And it also shows a lot of passion and dynamism and lots of other qualities that are going to be really exciting for the reader. So absolutely include if you've run your own business.
Totally.
A lot of you are asking about career gaps. As Tracy mentioned, we have got an entire webinar entitled Mind the Gap.
Yeah.
It is on our website. It's on our YouTube channel. I'm sure that if you go to the search bar and put Mind the Gap in, you'll probably be able to find it. If we're able to, we will share the link to it in tomorrow's content.
Yeah, I've made a note to include it, so we will. Yeah.
But it's a really, really specific subject. And I understand that a lot of you joining tonight have gaps on your CVs for one reason or another. The overarching advice that we can give is don't just leave a gap. Make sure that any gaps in your dates of employment have a reason against them. Because as we said earlier, if it's something that raises a question mark, it's likely to put you in the maybe pile, and sometimes that maybe pile ends up being the no pile because it might just never get referred back to if the yes pile is strong enough.
Yeah.
Where would you put on your CV voluntary or unpaid work? Tracy, thoughts on?
Yeah, I think there's probably two ways you could do this. I think if your recent work is voluntary, perhaps because it is easier to fit around children doing a voluntary role, I would put it currently. So I'd make it your most current role, describe what you do. It shows that you are keeping your eye in, if you like, you're keeping active, your skills are still being used. So I would do it there and use it as almost your sort of chronological order. If it's on in addition to your current work, it's stuff you do in the evenings, what weekends, and you've had no gaps recently, then maybe have it as a section, underneath the main career, but you could put voluntary work and have it as a separate section. But you use it to either top up what you've a gap, if you like, now, or pop it at the end.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a great question here. It's slightly off of CVs, but if you've been self-employed, who should you use for references? That's a really good question, and I completely understand why you're asking it. I personally would suggest using your clients. If you've been self-employed, you will have people who are your clients or your customers. They are going to be able to give you a reference. It's not going to be the same sort of reference as an employment reference, but they are going to be able to verify the quality of the service that you've provided to them. So great question. More than happy to follow up independently with people with quite specific questions like that. And I think we've probably got time for one or two more. Yes, we have a webinar on LinkedIn profiles. Again, it's available on our website and on our YouTube channel. Please do search for that. We are running it again. I believe, I can't remember which month we're running it in, but there will be, it will be run again. Quite a lot of people talking about career changes. I completely appreciate that that is very difficult when you're writing a CV and you're trying to change sectors or disciplines. I think that we've got a blog on career change on the website already, which we can signpost you to. We are also running a specific webinar for returners looking at career changes towards the end of February. Although it is targeting returners looking at career changes, it is a career change webinar. So you may well want to come along to that. We've got a career change specialist coach who's going to be speaking, and she will take you through not necessarily the detail of your CV, but how to work your mindset around that career change. When it comes to your CVs, you could look at a skills-based CV and highlight your transferable skills. Or as we've said many times, make sure you're tailoring your CV for each application that you make, and pull out those transferable skills in your past experience to really make sure that the employer can see the relevance of your application. Last question. Who are we going to pick? I'm very sorry. There's people asking if we can create their CV for them. I'm really sorry, but that's not something that we do. And the reasons are, this is your document. This is something that you need to live and breathe and really be able to talk through in the interview. As we talked about with the pre-formatting availability online, they're great to a point, but we would really encourage you putting together your own document so that when you're in an interview situation, you know that document inside out, you know your career history inside out, you know what you've made reference to inside out. So nothing's going to come as a shock, nothing's going to come as a surprise. I know it sounds daunting, but hopefully from tonight's webinar and the information that we're able to share over the next couple of days, you'll have a lot of tools to hand, you'll have a lot of advice and guidance. We do send out a template. It's not a template that you can then go in and populate, but it does go through the structure that Tracy talked about, and it repeats a lot of the guidance kind of in the body of that template as well, to really give you a clear idea how to lay your document out, what to include, what not to include. And I think we're at about time. Thank you ever so much for joining, everybody. There are still questions coming through, and we will try and address those for you. We will try and get to those questions. We really do appreciate you coming along this evening. We hope that you come along to future webinars. I know that we've signposted a lot of different webinars that we run, so do go onto the website, search through the collateral there. There's so much information that hopefully you'll find a guide for your particular line of questioning. Mine and Tracy's details, I think, are available on the website as well. So, you know, if you want to get in touch, please do.
There we go.
There they are, as if by magic. There they are. Please do get in touch. Anyone else in the office can help as well. So if you want to give us a call, we should be able to give you some guidance. As I said, we are running a special returner series in February. One of those sessions is about career change. The others are more specifically to do with returning to work. If you've enjoyed this evening, we would really appreciate any shares that you can give this out to your friends or forward on the email that we send to you. Any feedback that you have, either come straight to us or pop it on the Facebook profile or on Google. I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you.
I'm
Bye,
just looking at all the
everyone.
questions, Jo, thinking actually there's so many here. Just to say, tomorrow we will send out a very comprehensive FAQs which covers a lot of these, but yeah, we'll address some that might not be in there. So rest assured, these will be answered tomorrow.
Thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Yeah,
Enjoy
thank
the
you,
rest of your
everybody.
evenings. Bye.
Bye.